Get started. Okay, buddy. We are a little bit delayed, but that's okay. We can get started right into it, man. So, big question I want to ask you, and again, you and I talked about this before, but I want to get a better understanding of your startup, because from what we chatted before, you definitely started from the architectural side before you got into the today's world type of focus. And the best part
Mhm.
is, we were both in Sheridan College. I didn't realize that. I did
Oh,
not.
small world, eh?
Honestly, man, I didn't realize that until some people on LinkedIn, like I don't know if you know Dan, right? On LinkedIn, he just mentioned two Sheridan grads, and I'm like, oh shit, you're from Sheridan too.
Yeah. Dan Asimovich?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was
Oh,
amazing.
awesome guy.
Yeah, you had him too.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
Small world, man, small world. But
Yeah.
yeah,
He's actually the one that got me into my first job after college.
wow, look at that.
Yeah.
See,
He wrote a letter of recommendation for me, and that's what got me in the door. The funny thing is, when you're trying to find a job, they want someone as a new position, experienced, right?
that's all they
Starting
get.
position, but you have to be experienced. How does that work?
Yep, entry level was 5 years. That's the go
Yeah.
to stuff, right? Which is impossible. You can't have 5 years. Or, and here's the thing, you study AutoCAD, or most people study AutoCAD, but then they want Revit minimum 3 years entry. It's like, how the hell do you get a chance, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I like call it intermediate at that point, but still. But yeah, no, definitely. Let's chat a little bit about where you start, and then what your journey was and how you even got here today.
Yeah. So as far as getting into architecture, it's kind of a weird circumstance where my family moved from Mississauga to Oakville. And as a general elective, like the shop class or the home ec class at this particular high school, there was architecture. And that's kind of what got me, I took it because I liked art. And that's what got me into using AutoCAD, doing smaller little things as part of it, and then building up to doing floor plans there. So I really got interested in it throughout high school. And there's not that many high schools that offer that, as far as I know. Maybe they do now, but back then, this was 2016. Yeah. So no, even earlier than that, 2008. So yeah, so it was a while ago. Um, Went to Sheridan College after high school. Wasn't ready for college at that point. I was fresh out of high school, so 18, 19. I flunked. We just wasn't prepared, right, mentally to put in the amount of work that's required in that program. I was a
Right.
bit overwhelmed, right? Too immature. So I ended up going back to work with my brother doing interlocking landscaping. So some hard labor, pushing a lot of wheelbarrows, digging a lot of holes. And I hurt my back, and I said, I can't do this anymore. And I went to college the next semester. So yeah, and then I powered through it because I was a late bloomer, I guess you could say, because I took that year or two off after the first try, and I powered through it. So it was a 3-year course for the architectural technology, and I did it in 7 straight semesters.
Wow, you like
So
speed run it, right? Wow.
yeah, yeah, and that was probably one of the hardest things I ever had to do because you don't have any semesters off, so you're not taking off a summer. In between each semester is only a couple of weeks, so it was a real grind, and that's not an easy program to go through. So
No, it's not.
yeah,
It's I remember those late nights, man. Those were crazy CAD nights until 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Like you're just keep clicking away.
that's right. Yeah. So it was, I found it to be a grind. And then with each successive semester, even more so, right? 'Cause just when you don't have a break and you're just in it all the time doing schoolwork, it was a grind. But anyway, so after that, I mean, I graduated with honors in that. So I did something right and ended up getting into an architectural firm downtown called Adamson Associates. Large firm. They have offices across the globe, and I got put on a team that was working on the Museum of Modern Art Tower in New York. I worked on a couple of other projects that I was there intermittently when there were sort of stops and starts with that project. Um, World Trade Center Tower number 3, the new tower, I was on that team for a little while, and then I don't know if this project ever proceeded, but it was called American Dreamland. It was supposed to be like a next level Edmonton Mall in New Jersey.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Jesus.
yeah. So it was part of some pretty cool projects. The problem is, I was more interested in the actual build. This is what I came to learn than drafting. Having worked at that firm for around a year and a half, um, just constantly iterating versions of drawings, right? So they were the architect of record, but they would get sort of the design inspiration or design package from the actual, architect or designer. Then we would implement it into an actual set of working drawings that would then go to site,
Mhm.
right? So it was constantly revising over and over again, and that was just tedious. So you go to work 9 to 5, you work on the same set of floor plans over and over again for like a year.
Oh my god.
So
Yeah.
yeah, right. Um, and I decided that's really not what I'm interested in doing. And you'll probably recall, but part of the program at Sheridan, a couple of the classes were project management related, and I
Right.
found that interesting. And I had interest as well in the construction side. Just I like working with my hands. Um, Growing up, my dad was a mechanic for 35, 40 years. So he's always working with his hands. I've seen him build, finishing our basements and stuff like that. So he's kind of a DIY type of guy. So I think I picked up some of that, interest from him. And about a year and a half into that job with Adamson, I decided I needed to make a change. So I wanted to give project management a try. I ended up applying for an ad that I found on Kijiji for a company called Petrovax, and they did gas stations. So they would take, a plot of land and build a gas station on it. I actually took less money to do that, just to kind of get into the game
Right.
with the plan of, you know, getting that initial 1 year, say, of experience, and then that catapulting me into a role with a more prominent company. And that's exactly how it worked out. I actually had this I actually applied for the company that the PM at Petromax wanted to go to as well. And I asked him for a reference. My current boss, I asked for a reference. I don't know, too many people who have the cojones to do that. Right?
Not a lot of people, man.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, man.
Yeah.
But that's the way you get ahead. The ones who aren't afraid to kind of take that step. That's the way you gotta go, right?
Right. Yeah. So he was I was fortunate enough that he agreed. I think he knew that it was a larger company, it was a better company than the operation that we were working for. So he accepted it. And yeah, so that company that I ultimately got hired to was Govern Brown and Associates. They're based out of Toronto, but they have a couple of offices spread across Canada. They do over 500 million in revenue per year, specializing in commercial fit outs, so offices, retail, and hospitality. I was with them for 6 years, worked on $1 million jobs worth tens of millions of dollars for some pretty big names. Rogers, HSBC, Cole Renfrew. That was a big project. Their flagship store at Bain and Bloor downtown. And then before I left, Siskin's law firm in London. And these are jobs that are $500, $600, $700, some 1,000 plus per square foot. So this is high end stuff. Very challenging, and it was a different side of seeing and implementing the design into the construction. So knowing kind of what goes on the back end with the working drawings, right, putting together the construction documents, getting that feedback from or getting those drawings from the architect of record, and their detailing not being so what's the word practical or constructible, and then you just have to figure it out, right? So it's a very different dynamic compared to doing the actual drawings versus building it on site. So I've seen it from both sides now, and I still continue to do it from both sides with my current company. So yeah, after those 6 years, I decided I wanted to branch out on my own. Just got sick of, having a boss or having my potential, what I felt like was capped. Right. So when you're working at a corporate job, I read this book, uh, The Motive. I can't remember who the author was, but basically, when you're in a corporate environment, right, you're always climbing the ladder. That's the whole thing of the corporate environment. You're climbing the ladder. I got sick of that. I had this fire to start and build something on my own. If I'm going to put in all these extra hours working for someone, why not just put them in for myself, right, and build something on my own where I'm the boss
Yeah, like kind of
and
separate
call the
yourself
shot.
from like the 9 to 5 to like now 7 to 7, right? But you're putting so much effort back to yourself versus somebody else. So I can definitely agree with you on that point, right? Because you are working long hours. Working in an architecture firm is not easy most of the time. You're working long hours, sometimes overtime, sometimes just to get a project done. And if you're not the architect of record, sometimes you just don't get the recognition too, right? So
Yeah,
it's tough.
it ended up being working with Governor Brown. It ended up being like it was an excellent learning experience. So I don't want to knock it or anything like that. But it ended up just being this perpetual loop of grind on a project. Right, the last sort of like couple of weeks, it's nearing completion, and you're already starting in the next project. So you don't even have time to sort of sit back and admire your work. You're already planning for the next one, right? So when you're at the finishing stages, you're already putting together the scope of work and schedule and tender documents for the next one. So it just continuous, right? And only making a salary. I wasn't getting paid for all the extra hours I was putting in, working until 3 or 4 in the morning. So it got to the point after several years, it's just like, why am I doing this? COVID kind of helped push it, push it forward. Um, Certainly by a few years.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, Curry was the kind of the point where it actually pushed you off the cliff and got you started in the whole business, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like there were some cracks in the foundation that started happening in 2019. Like I said before, as you're climbing the corporate ladder, so I reached the position that I was after, which was the title of project manager, even though I was doing a lot of it beforehand.
Right.
So, um, sorry. So even though I was doing a lot of that work beforehand as a project manager, I didn't have the title and the salary to go with it. But then once I got that status, I sort of reached my mountaintop. And when I reached the mountaintop, there was nothing else to aspire towards. So that sort of drive started to decline. And then I was getting more complacent, right? So it was just kind of like, this is the way it is. There was nothing that was keeping me going. I didn't have that passion or that purpose anymore to keep me going. So I had to find it. The only way I could find it was by making a major change.
Yeah, it's
So
like escaping the whole rat race type of thing. It's like you gotta get off that whole lane and just go on your own. Basically, it's definitely a scary thought. I think a lot of people kind of taken that chance and moved on their own, especially
yeah,
during COVID. Right, COVID was like a terrible time. It was like you never knew if you're going to keep your job. That's one thing, right? You might as well just jump off the boat right now and kind of start your own thing versus waiting for, you know, that day, right?
yeah, yeah. So that uncertainty, that period of uncertainty during COVID gave me some time to reflect on, like, do I see myself doing this for the next 35 years? Right, because I was at the age of 30, and 35 would have put me at 65, so retirement age. And the answer was no. So if I don't see myself doing it in 35 years, why next year, next month, next week,
Right.
right? Might as well just go
Just do
for
it.
it.
Yeah, just do it.
Yeah,
So then let's
yeah.
talk about that then. Like today, as of today, what are you doing on a day to day basis? What's your whole business model right now? So at least the audience can know, because you and I
Yeah.
talked about it a little bit in more detail, and I love it. But I love to have the whole
Yeah.
community learn about it.
Yes. Yeah. So I'll backtrack just a little bit on that. So after I left that company, I happened to, in the previous 6 months to that, started looking a lot at investing, right? Whether it be stocks. Then from stocks, it went into real estate, listening to a lot of podcasts like Bigger Pockets and so on. And there was one common theme between all of them, the guests that were on them, and that was that they read Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, which I never read before. And almost a week after I had left my full-time job, I read that book. And that sort of like, ding, the light went off, right? Just the world of opportunity before you as an entrepreneur and business owner. And then how can I connect that, what I already know, with real estate, right? And the answer was architectural design. So at first I opened up my own architectural design firm leveraging that background that I had to serve investors in doing duplex drawings, right? Or homeowners doing renos to their house that are in need of permits. But then I had all of this other skill that I had acquired during my time as a project manager that I wasn't able to utilize. And that's really what I enjoyed more. Obviously, I proved that by leaving the architectural firm to go and work as a project manager for a construction company, right? So I decided to merge the two, and I connected with my now business partner, who was an existing real estate investor in Kitchener, to open up Tri-City Builders, which is a construction management firm doing design build for investors, Kitchener, Waterloo, and Cambridge. So now we do the whole process as construction managers. I'll do the design, so permit drawings, any additional dwelling units, so whether it be duplexes, triplexes, quadruplexes, additions, garden suites, which we have applied for 5 permits and been issued 5 permits this year. And then we follow through on the build side and executing it. The difference between, and which goes to the event that we were at yesterday, between the construction manager and the GC role, is the construction manager is sort of a high-level consultant. So they're looking out, they work for the client, they're looking out for the client first and foremost in their interests. And then we don't have any laborers on our staff. We're just PMs, project managers, and we hire all of the stubs. So whether that be we hire GCs and manage them, or we hire independent contractors like finishers and manage them, plumbers, electricians, HVAC, and so on. So that's what I'm doing now.
I see. Okay. Which is good because you love how to do the project management side. I know you're very passionate about that part. So just organizing your team, taking that skill level is like incredible. Because not a lot of people can do project management. It seems very simple in theory, but making it make sense on site, especially construction, is just next level stuff that even I struggle with. So it's like, it's a lot more difficult than what some people would assume.
Yeah, you definitely need to be a planner to be a project manager. You need to have a high attention to detail. And when you're working in construction, you need to know how things are built. Because if you don't know how something is built and you're talking to a subcontractor, now I knew I had a certain level of knowledge when I first entered the space of being a project manager, just from watching my dad build, or YouTube, Googling and reading. But you want to be able to talk to a subcontractor or a GC, especially as an investor, and know what it is you're talking about. When you have that credibility, right, you can call bullshit if you know something's not being done right. So the relationship that I have with subcontractors, they know I know what I'm doing, and there's that mutual respect between the two of us. And I'm constantly learning, even still, throughout the process. You never stop learning. Things are always going to go wrong, and you need to know that they're going to go wrong, and you just have to be prepared for it when it eventually happens and be able to make quick decisions.
And that's the best part about that, because you are working with these guys on site almost every day, right? You're on top of that stuff, and it's like so much better than. And this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. I know some people are trying to be remote project managers or contractors. Even for myself, I tried doing that for my Welland project, which is like an hour and a half away, trying to contract it myself. But, it was a little bit tough trying to make sure the work is done at the end of the day. I went out there once a week or twice a week, and it still wasn't enough. You have to constantly be there like every other day, if not every day, right?
Yeah, and that's what I was doing as a project manager for my old company. Is I was on the site pretty much 90% of the time. The only time I would ever be in the office is when I need to do forecasting, so projecting your monthly costs and profit margin. Other than that, it's pretty much on site every single day, all day, and that's what I enjoyed. I enjoy walking around this job site and seeing things get done, right? How it gets made. So I'd be talking to our site supervisors, I'd be talking to the subcontractors, they're asking questions, learning, planning, right? It's all about coordination as well with the subcontractors. So the more that you're on site, in my experience, the more productive you'll be, because you're not waiting for an answer, or they're not waiting for an answer. You're there, you discuss, you make a decision, and you move on. In some cases, you have to go to the client and get, the okay, the authorization to proceed. But just I've translated that to Tri-City Builders now, and I'm on site. The trades are on site. They have a question. I'm right there. I answer it. Let's move the goalpost forward, right?
Yep, and I think
That
that is the toughest part, because scheduling the trades is like a nightmare, right? It's never easy. They may have some other jobs to go to, or they can only be there at certain periods of time. You can't get the same guys to be on site at the same time. Basically, it's like there's so many issues there that a lot of people don't understand, and I've seen it from the back end. It's not simple, and even for myself, when I was trying to get my framer and electrician to work together, they wouldn't like each other. They just delayed my project for a few weeks. There's so many headaches there. So I definitely respect the fact that you're doing this on a day-to-day basis. So you can definitely help some of us here kind of understand that point of view too.
Yeah, I know what you mentioned about trying to manage it remotely, and that was not for me. I didn't have it in me, right? I like being on site too much, and I did it for a while. I was working for a more experienced investor that I'm sure all of you here probably know, and was a PM for 6 months, and she had uh, uh, renovations going on in Cornwall, North Bay, and Sudbury, and we'd be going once a week or every other week, and so much can happen within that time span, and you're not there to keep an eye on it. Like, it just wasn't. I like staying on top of things, being in control. That's probably why project manager suits me. And you're not there to answer questions. Trades will make decisions on their own, and then you go and see the result, and you just scratch your head. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. I started to adjust to it. It really comes down to communication. You have to be constantly communicating, and you have to find a contractor that's also doing the same to a certain point. You don't want them calling for every little thing, but you want them to tell you when the big stuff, challenges or decisions need to be made.
100%. So let's move on to the biggest topic for tonight. It's basically the ADUs that are been so popular the last couple of years, especially since Bill 23 was approved this year, right? Since Bill 23, but even before Bill 23, Hamilton was kind of already on top of that, was a 4-unit conversions. And now Toronto have done the whole 5-unit conversions as of May this year, right? And some other cities have been trying to push in for like laneway houses. I know St. Catharines has still working on their laneway bylaws, so they're still up and coming. But we're going to get some higher demand of like at least ADUs, like garden suites, laneway houses, whatever you want to call them. They're going to be very popular very fast in the next couple of years. So I just want to pick your brain a little bit. And I'm sure the audience would love to hear your point of view from on site. And you're currently working on one right now, right? So love to hear any feedback that you would have for us and help us understand ADUs better.
Sure. So additional dwelling units, ADUs, I've also seen it referred to as accessory dwelling units. They're still so new. No one really knows what they should be called.
They all have different
Right?
names, man. I've heard
And
of them all.
yeah, even in zoning bylaws and things like that, have different names. So there's still a figuring out process between all of the municipalities. I don't know if they'll ever get on the same page, but there's got to be some similarities. There already is some similarities between them. I can only speak from experience working in Kitchener. That's where all of the permits that I've applied for have been approved. So I can't really say too much on the other municipalities. But as far as the basics of it, so you have a separate structure from the primary dwelling unit, right? In most cases, it's going to be limited based on the size of that primary unit. So, for example, in Kitchener, it's 50% of the total gross floor area of the main house. So the main house is 1,000 square feet. Your maximum size for a garden suite is 500 square feet, up to a maximum size of 850 square feet, which is actually quite large. The caveat to that is that you can go down in Kitchener, so you can add a basement, you're essentially doubling your square footage. So what would be limited to 500 square feet could be 1,000 square feet potentially. Other things to consider is the size of the lot, the setbacks to the additional dwelling units, and I'm throwing a lot of technical stuff out. So just stop me anytime if you want me to expand on it.
No, 100%. The audience knows they can ask questions. Remember, guys, you guys can ask questions whenever you want. We'll respond to them as soon as we can. But yeah, you can continue on. Like, this is great stuff. Great stuff here, especially that basement part. But go on.
Yeah, there's actually another interesting thing, and this is something I would recommend to anyone who's considering it. If it's not in Kitchener and you want to ask questions, to just message me directly. But also, reach out to the planning department staff in your municipality, whether that's the city of Hamilton, St. Catharines, Mississauga. Technically, you pay for their salary with your taxes, right? So you should be able to reach out and ask them, say, hey, this is my property. This is what I want to build. Can I? What do I need to know? Right? Instead of doing the research yourself, trying to find the zoning bylaw and going through all of that technical jargon, you can either call or you can go into the city. You might need to make an appointment and then just say, lay it all out. Here's what I'm thinking. Tell me what I need to know, what I need to do. What can I do? What can't I do? Or what are the limitations with my property based on my zoning? Right? Most zones now, you can build an ADU on it. At least here in Kitchener. I mean, there might be some intricacies like the city of Waterloo we haven't applied for anything yet, but I know they say that you can put an ADU in the backyard for any zoning class, but there's limitations to it based on, say, the width of the lot or whether or not you can get, say, a walkway from the front yard to the ADU for fire access, right? So there's like these little loopholes you can call where like 90% of the properties don't qualify for it. Even though you can build an ADU, like 90% are eliminated.
Which is like the little fine print of the zoning bylaws. Like and I've had my fair share of those, right? On paper, it seems like, oh, great, you can do it. And then you read the fine print, and you're like, that little part just screws you over. That's it, right? Mm-hmm. But I definitely get that whole point because you definitely need to have a walkway, at least a walkway, like 4 feet all the way straight into your ADU, which is fair, but still, it's like, come on, you have to go for minor variance, right?
Yes, yeah. Some lots it's a struggle, even though they're wide enough for the ADU. Just if it's a bungalow, right? The bungalow is going to take up more area of that lot, right? More frontage. It's just built wider than a newer 2-story, and then your driveway on one side is going to be 9 feet. Let's say the bungalow will be 30 feet. And then you only have a couple of feet, sometimes 2-3 feet left over on the side yard, so the walkway doesn't work, and you can't put the walkway over top of the driveway either. It needs to be completely separated from it. Right? You could put it beside it, but then you need to have the right size side yard with the driveway.
Right.
Yeah. The parking is another sometimes difficult challenge to make it work. There's certain setbacks that you need to have, at least in Kitchener, from the property line to where your designated parking space is, which is 6 meters, which is quite interesting. So if you don't have a long driveway, you have to come up with some sort of driveway extension going to the backyard or whatever to make it work. But you need 1 parking space per unit. That's another requirement. I think the only way out of that is if you're closer to the downtown core. So public transit, the LRT here in Kitchener, where you can get away with less parking spaces.
Yeah, it's always the downtown areas I see that, their parking ratio is a lot lower than any of the urban areas that are kind of away from the city. So that's always going to be the case. You can't get around that unless you go through like minor variance committee of adjustments, which to me, buddy, it's like when I hear those 2 words, I'm like, I'm running away. I'm out. I don't want to deal with those guys. But we got some questions here. Let's see. Can you? Yeah, you can see the questions too, right? on chat?
Yeah, so Siva's asking, I think this is for a basement. Possible solutions when duct is not meeting min height requirements. So you can double check this. I'm not sure where this particular project is, but in some cases, you're allowed to have duct work at a maximum finished ceiling height, or minimum, sorry, ceiling height of 6'1" below ductwork. It's in Sarnia, so I don't know the municipality of Sarnia too well, but I know in Hamilton and Kitchener that is the minimum required ceiling height just below ductwork is 6'1". The rest of the basement, the minimum is 6'5". It's actually 6'4 3/4 of an inch height from finished floor to finished ceiling. So your possible solutions for the ductwork, if you can't hit that 6'1", or the city of Sarnia doesn't allow that, you have to go with pancake ductwork. So you're basically taking a more typical 8-inch by 10-inch trunk and turning it into 4 inches by 16 inches, or whatever the equivalent area is of the duct. So an HVAC subcontractor would be able to help you figure that out.
Now, here's my add-on to that, Michael, on that. Would you need HVAC designs, at least in Kitchener, if we were planning to do that in Kitchener?
If you're just replacing the existing furnace, you're not putting new in, then no. So
Okay.
if we were to take a furnace and relocate, as long as that property had a furnace already, we don't need to do a new design.
Even if you're changing the entire ductwork?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. If it didn't have it, then yes, you would need an HVAC design. So that happened to a duplex that we just finished a couple of months ago, where it did have a furnace at some point in the home's history, and then the owners took it out, and it had electric baseboard heaters throughout. I don't know why they would do that, but that's what they decided to go with. So we had to do an entirely new HVAC design. Could I have found some dishonest ways around it and drawn the furnace into the permit? Maybe.
It's like ethical versus unethical. But at the end of the day, it's like some people want to get their permits as soon as possible, and they're willing to take the risk. So it's up to each person, an investor, on that point. But no, it's very good that Kitchener doesn't make you do that. I know a lot of times in Hamilton, you touch the ductwork, they want HVAC drawings almost every time. And I'm sure, like Adam's here actually. He's a designer in Hamilton as well. I'm sure Adam can vouch for that as too. Like HVAC design has become very popular in the last couple of years, at least in my go-to stuff. We need HVAC designs almost every time for duplexes right now, so it's crazy. That's why I questioned it, right? I'm like, oh, does Kitchener need that? And it seems like it doesn't, which is fantastic because we don't need that stuff. It saves the investor money and it saves us time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, time, definitely. I mean, HVAC design, that's a week to 2 weeks, let's say, depending on the engineer's capacity. But still, if you can turn around a set of architectural blueprints within a week, you can go immediately for permit. You're not waiting on anyone.
Exactly. Less people to coordinate.
They are strict in Hamilton. I did a bunch of permits in Hamilton, and there's a lot of loops that you have to jump over.
I think Adam had a question here too. Let's look into that. Love to ask, have you needed to install a separate sub panel for ADUs that are within the same house as a primary unit, or in the main panel, or is the main panel always allowed to serve both units? Any restrictions on having the main panel located in the ADU? It's a good question. It's like an electrical question there.
Yeah, so as far as I know, when you're doing a duplex, let's say, you can get away with just doing the one panel, so the existing panel. But typically, when you're going through that process as an investor, the majority of the time, you're probably going to add on another meter, right? So that you can have each tenant with their own separate accounts, and you don't have to worry about that as a landlord. It depends on the circumstance, right? If you're, say it's your primary residence and you wanted to finish the basement, and you wanted to reduce the scope of work, especially if it's a newer home, you don't want to have to go through the process of rewiring the entire house. because you're going to need to move. If you were to turn it into a duplex, right, you'd have one sub panel or one panel in the main floor unit, one panel in the basement, 2 meters outside. So each is separate, right? So in a lot of cases, if it's a newer home, you don't want to do the whole rewiring. But if it's an older bungalow, to rewire bungalow is not a huge amount of work, especially if you're gutting the entire basement. You have full access from underneath to rewire the house. And the actual cost to put in a new meter outside is not that much, especially for those older homes having overhead service. If it's not a 200 amp service and it needs to be upgraded, it's an easy process. There's some cost from the electrician, but for them to do a double or dual gang meter base outside is not a huge cost. So it would be worth it in the long run if you're planning to keep that property, especially. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer, but basically the answer is you should, but you don't have to.
No, I agree. I did that for my triplex. Like, I had 3 different panels for all 3 units, right? And that's because I wanted to separate the bills between all 3 of them, right? And again, in my case, we were gutting majority of the house, so we didn't have any reasons not to. But yeah, no, I can agree. If it's a fairly new building and it's got like recent renovations in the last 5, 6, 7 years, maybe you shouldn't and just keep it as is, and it's not rip apart the entire ceiling just to add an extra panel.
Right. I will say in those older bungalows, like there's a lot of those here in Kitchener too that were built in the 1950s, 1960s. A lot of the wiring that was used is not grounded, and there's ways around it, but it's at some point it just becomes easier to rip it out and start from scratch. Then it's all brand new and safe, grounded properly, up to modern day standards.
Yeah, and that's the tough part to kind of sell to some investors too. Like, well, we need to upgrade every electrical because of, A, B, C, D, right?
Yeah.
To eat that cost, and especially since it doesn't help sometimes in refinancing process because it's all behind the walls, right? We both know, like, anything behind the walls, the appraiser isn't really going to see. It's definitely a hard pill to swallow, but I can agree with just modernizing it and just making sure it's meeting times, and you don't have to worry about it if you plan to keep it. Now, if it was a flip, I don't know 100%. I don't know what I do in that case.
Yeah, so there's ways around it where the electricians can still make it safe. That depends on what kind of wiring is used. Even if it's aluminum wiring, from what I understand, they can I don't know exactly what they do, but basically they cut the aluminum wire, they add sort of a box where it then transitions into copper at the receptacle. So the receptacle being your outlet. And that the reason for that is to prevent it from overheating and catching fire.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So there are things that they can do. They can also add a GFI in the circuit. So the way that electrical cabling is run, it's on each breaker so many amps. So many amps will feed so many receptacles, light fixtures, right, power appliances. So when you have, say, you have 5 outlets or 4 outlets in a room, one on each wall, those are daisy chained together. So basically one cable is fed from your panel to the start of it, and then it's brought into a receptacle, and then a new wire is fed from that receptacle to the next receptacle, to the next receptacle. So that's a daisy chain. At the start of that, they could add a GFI outlet that will trip if anything were to happen down the rest of the chain. So that's another workaround that they can do to make it up to current code. And that might be a way to save cost.
There we go. That's the gold mine we're looking for, because I know some people don't want to rip apart their entire basement just to get that extra panel or making it to modern code type of thing, which again, it's reasonable because if the basement's already finished, you're going to get screwed over just because you want to update it a little bit more. But I think the main question we have to look into as well is more the electrical panel for the ADU too, right? It's like, so we had the duplex, and then now it's 3 units almost every lot in Ontario. A lot of people are going to do the ADUs. So the electrical panel for that ADU, it would be on that ADU. It wouldn't be like part of the 2 panels in the house, correct?
Correct. It would have its own panel.
Oh, I see.
And its own meter with its own account from whoever the hydro company is in that particular city.
Right. Okay. So same concept, but just it's going to be on that building instead of the main household. Okay.
So the meter would still be on the main household wherever the power's coming in.
Right.
But then it would go from, if you had a single gang meter, so you'd have 1 meter outside on the side of your house or wherever it is. If you were to do a duplex and you add a second panel to it, you'd have a 2 gang meter base. And if you're doing an ADU, then you'd have a 3 gang meter base. If you had a quad, you'd have a 4 gang and so on. So they just keep adding meters on, and they call it a meter base. So the actual meter base would be with the rest of the panels. And the reason for that is because when they come around and they check the panels, it's all in one spot visible to them. They don't have to go into the backyard and look on the garden suite of the ADU for it. And then you would trench over underground to the ADU, where you then stub up from underground and then go through the exterior wall, and there's where your new electrical panel would be servicing the ADU.
Oh, I see. Okay, that makes more sense then. Okay. So then on that note, what do you call it? I know we talked about it briefly. I'm sure some people are interested in this fact, but the services are run from the ADU. Now, either the services run from the ADU, like the drainage, the water, everything else, like runs out underground services directly to the street, or sometimes it runs into the existing household. I've seen it both ways, and a lot of the cities want it to be straight from the ADU to the street. It doesn't want it to be connected to the existing household, which could save us costs, because imagine you have a driveway. Now you got to rip apart that existing driveway just to put in the underground services, and then
Which we've
redo
done.
the driveway, which you've done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we talked about it a little bit.
Yeah.
I can't imagine how much of a pain that was, but maybe you can explain a little bit more on your side, especially in Kitchener.
Yeah, so I think this is something that the municipalities are still working their way through as to what the standard is. But just to clarify, it's not connected to the city service directly. It's connected, like on the street, it's connected within the property lines, right within the property boundaries. So you're not connecting directly to city service from the street and getting independent service. You'd be just tapping into whatever service is already coming onto the property from the street. But in the city of Kitchener's case, you can't connect, or they don't want you to connect to the plumbing in the existing house, primary residence. They want you to do it from the outside. So if every property has a curb stop on it, right? Those are the metal kind of circular spray painted blue. That's the water shut off. That's a curb stop, right? So basically, you want to transition from that one city curb stop into 2 curb stops, one for the main house and one for the garden suite. So you're putting a Y in it, basically, or a T. So you can control each independently from one another. And that's where your new water line is coming around and into the garden suite. Same thing with your sanitary sewer. You're going to tap into it in the front yard, depending on whether it's corner lot or interior lot. Put a Y in it, and that Y is one way is going to go into the main house and continue out as it always did, and the other one is going to go around and into the garden suite. So the garden suite is completely isolated from the main house. Just in case there's ever any sewer backups or anything like that in the main house, it wouldn't affect the garden suite because it's independent.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Do they have any specific reasons why they want to be connected? Or I'm assuming it's probably because eventually some people are going to severance these properties at one point or another.
I think it's part of it's for maintenance, right? So if they ever need to, if there's ever work done in the main house, then the garden suite wouldn't lose its services as well, right? So they remain independent.
Oh, I see. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you put it like that way, yeah, I guess I wouldn't, if I'm living in the garden suite, I wouldn't want my stuff to be affected just because the main household has some issues, right?
Right. Or say the garden suite backed up, the main house wouldn't be affected and vice versa.
Right. So it's more of a safety insurance type of thing too, because yeah, no, you don't want one unit affecting all your other units just because you didn't disconnect it from the start. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe
the benefit, from the water side as well, is that allows the garden suite to be independently metered as well.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that. You're right. It can be definitely like separate and part of utilities at that point.
Exactly.
Right? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Same thing with gas.
Yeah, if you're using gas, no, you're right. Because now all the utilities, gas, water, electric, can all be on a separate bill directly straight to the tenants. Right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there is an interesting thing that we started doing on some of the duplexes, since we've already gutted the basement and are redoing plumbing, is instead of after the fact, going around the driveway, causing a big mess, right? Because all your sewer lines are from the city 8 to 10 feet, sometimes even deeper than that. So that's a lot of trenching that you have to do all the way to the backyard. A lot of these backyards are deep, right? They're 120, 150 feet deep. That's a lot of earth that needs to get moved for a trench. So what we've done instead, when we've upgraded the plumbing, both water and sewer, to the main house as part of the duplex renovation, we've run separate water lines and sewer lines through the house, out spitting out the back to cut out all of that trenching. So basically, we're digging up the entire front yard, right, where the city services are coming in from the street to do the plumbing upgrade. So converting it to 1 inch water line from whatever was the existing, say, the 1/2 inch copper, 5/8 copper, and the old sewer system, if it was asbestos or if it was, I don't know, steel or clay, which we found too, to modern PVC going to the house. So we have 2 runs for each, or sometimes 3, since we're doing independent water lines for the basement apartments as well. We'll have 2 sewer connections coming into the house. One is in the house, and one's going straight out through the back foundation wall into the backyard. That one's intended for the future garden suite. Same thing with the water line. So they're allowing that here in Kitchener. I can't speak to other municipalities, but that's a good way to save costs and time and stress on the trenching around the house. Now, if the house is already rented, sorry, you're out of luck. But if you are doing a duplex and you want to put a garden suite in the future, say after you refinance, that's one option that you could look into and save a bunch of money.
Yeah, no, I like it. It's like the whole rough-in idea that some people used to have before when they bought a single family and they want to sell it. They put in the rough-ins for the bathroom from time to time. So you can already build your bathrooms and don't have to demolish the existing concrete slab. So you're basically taking that idea and putting it more on the exterior side for a garden suite. So all the services are already done, and all you got to do is pop in like the frame in and the foundation, and then you're good to go.
Yeah, because if you're already carving up the basement slab to redo the plumbing anyways, what's cutting up a little bit more of it to get the extra room that you need for the water and sewer to go for the garden suite, right?
Yeah, and that's the difference, because if you're already doing it anyways, how much more cost are you going to be adding in to do that versus if you wait the 5 years and do that just as a single scope of work? The contractor is just going to charge you as much as he would have. Well, that's extreme. Maybe half the amount he would have if he had done it from the start, give or take. Right?
Right. Well, you're building that cost into the duplex work.
Exactly.
Right. So you're getting more cost than the duplex, but you're paying less after the fact. So you got to kind of eat that upfront cost. I will say though that you would need to have a permit in for the garden suite at that time. They won't let you do it for future.
Oh, okay.
Because if you're running a new water line into the backyard, it wouldn't have a meter on if it just coiled up sitting in the backyard, right? Until you actually build it. They don't want to do that because you could always tap into that 1 inch water line without having it metered. So you'd be getting water for free. So they don't want that.
Okay.
So you'd have to do it concurrently.
So the I guess the ADU, the garden suite permit, would have to go in right after the duplex within a year, give or take. Is that the correct timeline? Like, how long would they allow that for?
So the garden suite permits that we've done have basically gone in a couple weeks after the duplex permit.
Okay, so in that scenario where you're telling us to do that additional work for the duplex,
you have to have a permit in place for the garden suite. But once you've have that permit in place and you've done at least that initial inspection for the water and sewer, then they won't close the permit. If you don't do any work on the building permit after it's been issued for 6 months to 12 months, you have to read the fine print from the municipality. They might expire. Yeah, but if you've done at least that one inspection, it won't.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's where some people want to wait a few months. You know, sometimes they don't want to do any work for the winter, so then they kind of save it up for the spring. And that's a reasonable amount of time. But if you wait like a year, I know some permits, I have to remember which one, but some cities allow the permits to stay active for like up to 2 years, right? But again, even at the near expiration date, you have to have kind of a valid reason why you didn't start construction. And it could be a number of reasons: the weather, personal stuff, or maybe even financial issues, right? That you just can't afford it. There's other ways. There's other reasons why it wouldn't be, why you couldn't do it, right?
Exactly.
Let's go back a little bit. I think we had a question here about glass openings that I missed. I completely missed until I think Adam messaged us while we were talking. Right? It's the is the glass opening in main door can be added to the window area requirements? What do you think, man?
Guess that means for natural lighting.
I'm assuming so. Yeah.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, I would say yes. Yeah, I would say the same thing.
Yes. So in one of our garden suite designs, um, actually it's the one that we're furthest along on. We're doing a property tour on Saturday for. Uh, we have a door in the bedroom rather than a window, and that's acceptable for it's a full light. So full light means that the entire door panel is glass with stiles, 6 to 8 inch style all the way around. That's a perfectly acceptable source of natural lighting versus a window.
Wow.
And,
So
yeah,
a whole door, just one door, no windows. Okay.
correct. Yeah, the reason that we did that, I had windows in the initial design as well, but they wanted to save on wall space, so preserve wall space for the bedrooms layout. So we ended up going with a door that's an outswing, and what that door is there for as well is that's the side with the walkway for the fire access. So it's a secondary door, and they still allow it for the fire access. The primary one is on the driveway side, which makes sense because you're parking, you want to walk through the front door, right?
Okay, so if I get that right, then you have basically two exits for this unit, one in the driveway side, one in the bedroom side. So it serves as both the natural light requirement and the second egress in a way.
Exactly.
Okay, so then my question here too is like for that door, it's fire rated, like it's glass blocks.
No, it's not fire rated because the setback from the property line is 1.2 meters.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, wow,
Yeah.
that's pretty interesting. I can't wait to see that. Actually, that's for the Saturday tour, right?
That's right.
Perfect. Yeah, no, I'm definitely going to take some pictures on that. But that's pretty creative. 2 for 1. That's the whole idea.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So it serves two purposes. So it works out well, and the client's happy with it. I think I prefer the window, but like having the window as well. But it works.
Well, it saves on cost, saves on labor, it saves on a lot more than if you add the window. But as designers, I get it. We want to have windows as much as possible. But yeah, no, definitely, it's quite the interesting idea that you got there. Okay, let's keep going with the ADUs because I know we talked about a little bit of the outside stuff, and we talked a little bit about zoning, right? What we can do there. Let's talk a little bit about the construction side of things, right? Like,
yeah, so I'll tie that into the design process too. This thing is like building a house. So you have to have all the necessary documents for it. So you would have your architectural design, your structural engineer stamping off on design. You'd have your HVAC design. Then you might need to get separate approvals from the planning department and the building department, and they might talk to each other. So in the city of Kitchener, you need what's called a zoning occupancy certificate. Basically, what that means is they do a zoning check based on your site plan, building elevations to make sure that it meets all of the criteria in the zoning bylaw, the building height, the setbacks, the walkway, the square footage based on the main house, all those kinds of things. I just want to throw that in there.
No, it's good because I do zoning certificates as well. And it's just to be 100% sure they're not going to give you any grief during the whole permit application, right? Because for you guys that don't know too much about the architectural zoning part of it, the way it works is that if you do the zoning certificates, you don't have to go for a rezoning anymore. So then you're cleared. You're basically clear for that. And then they just review the architectural and the structural and mechanical. But if you don't go through the zoning certificate and they do have an issue with your application, and let's say, for example, your square footage is a little bit more than what you assume, you have to rework all the architectural, all the mechanicals, all the structural stuff just because your zoning wasn't cleared first. Because that's the number one thing they'll check, zoning. So imagine paying everybody else extra revision fees just because the zoning wasn't cleared, and now you're delayed a couple weeks, you're delayed maybe a month just because you have to get the revisions and then revise it back to the city. So I highly suggest getting that zoning certificate.
Yeah, so what I usually do is I'll make up a proposed site plan before I finish the building permit set, and I'll send it into someone in the planning department to have a look over for, and they'll check, based on the property address, what zone it's in, and then give me kind of a brief if there's anything I need to tweak beforehand. And that sort of helps. That little extra step helps on the back end during the review process. So do it before you submit the application, not after. Especially with the building department. The building department has to get back to us within 10 working days with their either approval or status letter. But then after you get, say, the status letter with corrections that need to be made, there is no timeline for them to get back to you.
Yeah, no, I know. That's
So basically, it goes on the bottom of the pile, and when they get to it, they get to it.
That's the most painful part, man, because we all know there's not going to be a perfect application. Maybe I've had one perfect in like thousands of drawings a couple years ago, but that was like, I would say, a fluke. But most of the time, we're not going to get that perfect application, and we're going to get a letter, at least one or two comments back, and then we're just waiting for them, right? It could be 2 weeks. I know in Hamilton, and again, Adam can kind of vouch for me here too, but for me, it's like 2 weeks for the second review, third review, fourth review, whatever you want to call it. So you send it back to them. They're like, oh, we'll get to you in 2 weeks. And if you don't follow up, that could be like 3 weeks or 4 weeks. So we always have to stay on top of that stuff. But actually, you bring up a good point with the planning department as well. Let me ask you this. Do you need to have a topographic survey and grading plan in Kitchener?
No.
No, even though it's a new building.
Because it's an existing lot, they don't require it.
Oh, it's perfect. That's what I want to hear, man. I don't want to spend $4,000, $5,000 on like surveys for nothing, man.
No, even property surveys, we've been pretty good. In some cases, I'm just using the data off of their zoning map, not even an original property survey, and drafting that up into plans that it's been acceptable to them.
Yeah, no, I've done the same thing. Yeah.
You're saving $2-3 grand on the actual survey, and then you throw in the topographic part of it too. Yeah, they can get up there, and surveyors, they can be hard to find, or they can be hard to get, like, the wait for them.
Well, it's like 4,000 or 5,000 plus like 16 weeks to wait. And if you're in winter, they're going to wait until spring to get to you. So in order to speed things up, especially with this housing crisis, we have to be able to do that. Basically, the zoning interactive map is our best friend at that point. The only time they've asked me for a legal survey is when we're going through committee of adjustments, minor variants. They're like, we want you to confirm this with a legal planner or legal surveyor. I'm like, it's crazy because now we have to wait another 12 more weeks to kind of get that official document.
Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. So. Yeah. Usually one of the first things I'll ask a client is to request a property survey from the city if they don't have one themselves. Pay the, I don't know, whatever, how many dollars? I think it's like $15 for them to pull it from the archives. And that definitely helps the process, especially when it's an irregular shaped lot. If it's a rectangular lot, it's not a big deal. But when it's a regular shaped lot, like the second property that we're going to go see on Saturday, you definitely will need a property survey. I've actually had it where one of the clerks who received the building permit submission through the online portal emailed me about exactly what you had just asked, needing a grading plan. But fortunately, I had already. I was freaking out when I got that request, by the way.
Like we all would. Right? I would definitely freak out at that point.
Yeah. But the main reason I was freaking out is because I had already submitted a building permit for another garden suite where they didn't ask. So I had to email back and get clarification on it. And as it turns out, fortunately, you don't need one. I mean, it makes sense, right? You're building on an existing lot that already has grading done. Why am I adding?
Like, is there a rule of thumb? Is there a rule of thumb for that, or is it just they just don't need it just because? Like, I like to get valid reasons sometimes, but sometimes I'm just like, I don't care today. I'll look into it tomorrow.
Yeah, as far as I'm not too sure on that. This is just what they've decided.
I see,
right, the property is already going to have its existing slopes, swales, things like that. There is minimum requirements to building code for a new structure. It needs to be 6 to 8 inches. Grade needs to be 6 to 8 inches below it, right? Below whatever your exterior wall is. So if it's siding versus brick, that will change. Then you need your 2% slope away from the building. So meet those requirements, and I guess they're good with that.
Yeah, like those are bare minimum grade-ins. So I don't think we want to spend that much money on doing that extra service just for nothing, almost, right?
Yeah.
But okay, I think we're pretty much at that 1 hour mark. And this is where I usually ask you the same question I ask everybody else. Because, like, for me, my understanding is, you're a BCN designer, right? You have your qualifications, or
Correct.
right,
For small buildings. Yeah.
right. So, do you think it's worth it to go through the whole process, or it's not? It's so tedious, and you wouldn't want to do it again.
Looking back now, I probably wouldn't do it again, just because I'm at a different place than where I was before, right? If you're really interested in architecture and architectural design, then yes, definitely get it. Unless you're an architect, then you can have your licensing done through the OAA, which is a little bit different. But for us, we need that so we can do a certain level of, whether it's houses or commercial buildings. And it's not that hard. I didn't I studied for it, but what I found is when I actually took the test for it, um, I just referenced the index a lot, looking for the keywords, right? And I would
Right.
find. So I didn't memorize the freaking code book, right? I knew the basics, right? But if there was a specific question, I just checked the index, look for the and reference it, and that's how I
Yeah.
was able to pass. So
No, I think it's well worth it, right? It's just trying to get some of the newer guys and next generation people to kind of understand how important it is, especially when you're job hunting or even applying for city jobs, right? I know every examiner at every city needs to have their BCN in order to get that job to review somebody else's drawings, right? So
I
it's
actually
definitely a
applied for a
massive.
position doing that in the city of Toronto.
Oh, look at
But
that.
yeah, but I didn't get it.
Well, it all happened for a reason. You're in a better
That's
place,
right.
I would think,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. No, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, I love having you back on here, or having you join us. I know you've been part of the Grow community for a bit, and it was only recently until you and I met in person that I finally kind of clicked two and two together, right? But now that
Yeah.
you're more online, we can definitely have a more in-depth discussion about other topics too. Because I'd love to pick your brain on a little bit more stuff outside of duplex and ADUs, right? But definitely
Yeah,
love having you here.
we can definitely talk about more on the construction side. I know this is more design focused, but more like how you optimize floor plans for efficiency, save on cost and things like that. I'm sure people would find that useful.
No, 100%. And for sure, I'll be there Saturday. I'll record as much as I can. We'll get a couple interviews with you, and we'll show people the construction side of things too.
Perfect.
Perfect. All right, Michael. Thanks a lot. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Again, you guys can reach out to Michael if you have any questions about ADUs. He's on the Grow Network here. And I'm sure Michael will be more than happy to help you guys, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Perfect. All right, guys. Take care. Thank you. And we'll talk
All right.
soon. All right.
See ya. Bye
Yeah.
bye.
appreciate it. That's how other people find out about these things. And just awesome to have another architect. That picture of all three of you guys was really cool. But yeah, if there's anything we can do for you guys, let me know. And yeah, I just want to really appreciate your patronage and being in the room, just being a kind soul. Okay, take care, sir. Have an awesome night. I'm just catching up on IG stories now, so I wanted to catch them all before they disappeared. Ciao.